Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 8 of What You Need to Know About Boxing. I'm your host, Philip. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope that you had a good weekend, all of that. Really excited to get into a really fun weekend of boxing we just had and a borderline overwhelming upcoming weekend of boxing on the horizon here. Going to break down everything. Now, I also try to include breaking news on this show. As of right now, there's currently all kinds of news breaking. Just to give you a taste, apparently Xander Zayas will not be getting his shot against Sebastian Fundora. Fundora's vacated his WBO title for a Tim Tszyu rematch. There's other rumors that Fabio Wardley might not have Jarrell Miller as his upcoming opponent for his fight in June. Lots of breaking developments, lots of news, I think, yet to be finalized. So I might actually make a separate video, not a full podcast, but just a news reaction video later this week when I really have all the facts and can properly give a well-informed opinion. I think that is for the best. But, you know, that segment being aside, let's get into breaking down what happened last weekend and what's coming up this week. And in order to properly do that, we have to jump straight away into the Who's That Fighter segment. Again, hopefully one of your favorites. I know it's mine. And do you recognize this man? Do you recognize the baldness? Well, that's because this man is a legend of the boxing game, the former middle and super middleweight champion of the world, Chris Eubank Sr. This man made this weekend he made what was already a good domestic British fight, a proper grudge match, into Rocky-like, WWE-esque, fantastic storytelling, and just made an event which was already high stakes come to life, whether you were there in the arena in Tottenham Hotspur or you were, as I was, watching from afar. This man made the event feel absolutely special. When you're in the lead up to the fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, and you're publicly doing interviews talking about how the fight is a disgrace, about how you don't have respect for what your son is doing, how he doesn't listen to you, and you are full of negative aspirations towards your own son in his biggest moment in his career. For you to come around and show up to Tottenham Hotspur to support your son in the moments where he needs you most is really commendable. And you saw we had depending on if you were watching on DAZN or Sky Sports, but when they showed Chris Eubank Jr. and Sr. coming to the arena together, Chris Eubank coming out of that limo, embracing his son, the raucous applause that you heard from the 60 or so thousand people that were in attendance was amazing. That was pure storytelling. You could throw that in any movie. Amazing, amazing stuff. And I know that if you're a boxing purist and you just want to talk about the best fighting the best and let's just talk about the fights, I understand that. But what you have to understand is that we are a small fraction of what boxing is. The amount of time I've spent watching boxing, learning about how fights are made, about mandatories and sanctioning bodies and all of this. The average fan finds that completely inaccessible. They just don't have access to that information in a way which is readily available. So for them, for the casual, which are the people, do you think that all 60,000 people at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium are even borderline hardcore boxing fans? Do you think they really knew anyone that was on the undercard? I certainly don't. But they showed up for a big event. They showed up to be wowed and amazed. And when you can have these big, casual, friendly moments, like a father and son reuniting before his son heads to the biggest moment of his career, That is what keeps boxing alive. You need, absolutely, you need moments that transcend the sport, and you need them in a healthy dosage. Because if you get too wrapped up in who's this one's mandatory and, you know, this guy on this undercard, all of that, it just doesn't ever break through to the casual fan. This night, this whole night was amazing for the sport of boxing in terms of keeping momentum, staying in the public eye, having big moments. That's what this entire event was about. And for that, I couldn't be more grateful. Now, let's get into the actual fights themselves. And first, I want to spend some time going over my predictions for the undercard fights. Now, we saw a trilogy between Anthony Yarde and Lyndon Arthur, at which point I had predicted Anthony Yarde to have another, well, not another good performance, but I had said it seemed that Anthony Yarde, in his biggest fights, have his best performances. And this fight against Lyndon Arthur really broke the mold on that model. And I was really expecting more from this. Look, Lyndon Arthur literally came off the couch to take this fight. He was, for all intents and purposes, a retired fighter. He came out of retirement because Lyndon Arthur and Anthony Yarde had one win against each other, and they wanted to settle this in a trilogy. For the longest time, I've had to hear about how Anthony Yarde has all the tools to be an elite light heavyweight, that he can, on any given day, give a champion a really tough fight and maybe win a title. But again, I tried to excuse Anthony Yarde's last fight against an unknown fighter who had a decent record, but ultimately Anthony Yarde went way too competitive with him. Now you have Lyndon Arthur, who, if you really look at their two fights, held a split decision over Anthony Yarde when Yarde had lost his father. Yarde had come back to knock out Arthur in 4 rounds, something that Dimitri Bivol didn't do when he fought Lyndon Arthur, by the way. And now you have in this trilogy, co-main event in one of the biggest British fights you're going to have this decade, and you put on a stinker of a performance where Anthony Yarde is gassed out through 7-8 rounds. Lyndon Arthur is just sitting on the ropes, firing off counter shots. It was just so sloppy of a fight. It did not. It just wasn't a good look. It wasn't a good look for Anthony Yarde moving forward. I thought it was a fine look for Lyndon Arthur, considering that he was legitimately retired, and one of the main reasons that I was hedging on Yarde winning by knockout. I'm not even sure if Yarde deserved to win this fight, but conversely, I'm not sure that Lyndon Arthur deserves to win this fight. I think this could have been a draw. I guess you go Anthony Yarde, who just seemed to push more later down the stretch, even if he wasn't landing the clean work. Arthur was just throwing so little that I suppose Yarde takes that by default, but not a good fight. But Anthony Yarde wins by decision, not knockout. We move on here. Liam Smith taking on Aaron McKenna. Now, I don't just view boxing from the American point of view. I follow several people over there in the UK, and I saw many of prediction for Liam Smith to either win or win by knockout. I saw that widely across the board. I could not really understand that perspective whatsoever. You're dealing with Liam Smith, 19 months out of the ring, coming off of a stoppage loss in which he both hurt his ankle and his back. And now you have Aaron McKenna, a young gun, undefeated Irish fighter who is a true, fully fledged middleweight, not Liam Smith, who knows that there's more opportunities for him when he doesn't have to make the weight cut. I saw this as a clear-cut, unanimous decision win for Aaron McKenna, and that's exactly what happened. I think scorecards giving Liam Smith 1 or 2 rounds is even generous there. I think that was the judges being nice, if I'm being quite honest. Aaron McKenna pitched a shutout. Uppercuts were too good. The one thing that did impress me, though, I thought McKenna would lead a lot of this fight on the front foot, but he did concede ground to Liam Smith. He let Smith lead, but McKenna was able to counter so effectively off the back foot, able to just have an answer for everything Liam Smith tried to do. You could tell around the seventh or so round that Liam Smith sort of accepted his fate. I think he knew he wasn't going to win this fight. And then in round 11 and 12, he began to push. McKenna scored a nasty body shot knockdown in that final round that I thought, oh no, my prediction, I'm not going to get it, where he wins by unanimous decision. But Smith, to his credit, toughed that out. But Smith is done. They didn't have a formal retirement announcement for Liam Smith, but I can't imagine that he continues fighting unless there's some other fight out there for him that is at a better level. But Aaron McKenna, too young, too big, everything in the mix. But middleweight right now is very shallow. I will always welcome a new middleweight contender, someone that now has fought on a really high-profile card. I look forward to see what's next for Aaron McKenna, but I'm not so sure what. Normally I like to be a future matchmaker when I discuss these things, but just like with Anthony Yard, I don't know where you go next with Aaron McKenna, but I'm all on board for whatever he does next. Also on the card, now this one I was very happy about. Vidal Riley picks up a unanimous decision win over Chev Clark. Look, Vidal Riley is legitimate, a legitimate cruiserweight. Everyone wants to talk about how, Chev Clark didn't show up, that he looked flat, all of this. Nonsense. If you just look at his last 3 fights, he fought basically the same way. The problem was Efe Tobor Apochi and who is the other fighters that he fought in his last 3? He had the other guy from the UK, and he had... Oh, goodness. I can't remember offhand, but be that to say, Chev Clark's last 3 opponents were didn't have nearly the foot movement of Vidal Riley, didn't have half his footwork. They didn't present any sort of real boxing threat where Chev Clark might get outpointed. So they banged it out, and Chev Clark was able to out-hustle them. But Vidal Riley, as I said, was just going to be too good off the back foot, too good of a pure boxer. That Olympic pedigree, that GB squad pedigree. I know Chev Clark has that too, but that's not how his pro style has developed. And I was really happy to see this win play out because I had seen the potential in Vidal Riley when I watched his fight against Mikhail Lawal, I believe his name was. And I just saw someone that had big opportunity to really impress on a big stage. And he did. He boxed brilliantly. Made Chev Clark really look terrible out there. I know Clark was coming off of a loss, but that was a very different fight where he was hurt in the first round, and then Mosquea sort of ran out of gas. Clark worked his way back into that fight. This was a fight where Vidal Riley pretty much shut him out from the early on stretch and just had a masterful performance. So good stuff there by Vidal Riley. Also on this card, I got to take the L here. I predicted Brandon Glanton to win by knockout in the 10th round. I thought that Bill Smith's style, his age, the damage he's taken would be a little bit too much at this point, and Glanton would understand the opportunity in front of him. I do think that Glanton still had a very respectable performance. I think both men gave it their all. This was a high-intensity fight, a really good fight to watch. I think much better of a fight to watch than Anthony Yard, Lyndon Arthur, no doubt about that. But Chris Bilm Smith, a little bit too much championship experience for Brandon Glanton to get over, which was really important here. I really think this was a battle where Bilm Smith just had more experience at the highest level and more experience later in a fight. Glanton, yes, he had that 11th round knockout win over Alexei Egorov, but beyond that, he was a fighter that predominantly got things done in the first half of a fight. And I think once Smith did weather those first 6 rounds, where I had Brandon Glanton up 4-2, you saw Chris Bilm Smith take over, have better moments, better defensive awareness, and just cleaner work overall. Nothing too flashy, nothing to really hang your hat on, but good enough work that he got it out. I think a close but clear unanimous decision. So good stuff for Chris Billam-Smith. Ben Shalom seems to be pretty adamant that he wants Billam-Smith to fight for the WBC cruiserweight title next. We're going to get to that because that title is being contested this weekend, and I would like Chris Billam-Smith's chances to be champion once more if he can land that fight. So we'll see. But moving on here to the main event, I've already given a little bit of a preview talking about his father, but Chris Eubank picks up a unanimous decision win, 116-112 across the board. I had originally predicted him by 9th round knockout, but credit to Conor Benn. For as much as I think Conor Benn deserves a lot of criticism, you cannot take performance enhancement drugs and not have to go through career hell for the rest of your boxing career. Like, genuinely, we shouldn't let these people off the hook 100%, but I also don't believe in no retribution, no way to come back, lifetime ban. I think life is too short for a lifetime ban, if I'm being honest. I understand if you cheat, you need serious consequence, and I do agree with that. Seriously, I do. But you have to find a way for people to have redemptive moments. It's just my philosophy on it. And this was a redemptive moment because Conor Benn got to taste his first loss. He got to be humbled in front of 70,000 people. But he did have a good performance, everything being what it was. I really think Chris, this was funny. This was a fight of two halves, maybe even 3/3, where Chris Eubank had a pretty good first round, but then Conor Benn really started to put it on Chris Eubank in that second and third round, visibly hurting Chris Eubank several times. And based on what I was seeing online in chats that I'm in, people were saying, oh, Chris Eubank, the weight cut, it killed him. He has no legs. He has no movement. He's too slow. Because keep in mind, if you didn't know, this fight had a 10-pound rehydration clause. So the fight was contested at 160 pounds. So both men had to weigh at 160. But then 8 a.m., the day of the fight, they had to both be under 170 pounds. But Chris Eubank is easily a man that walks around at about 185 pounds, if not more. So the fact that he wasn't able to fully rehydrate as soon as possible definitely creates diminishing returns on what your body can do. But I was telling anyone who would listen, even though Conor Benn was looking really good in those first 5 or so rounds, you got to let Chris Eubank get his legs back. Let him get into the fight. He's 35 compared to a 27-year-old. You got to let him feel the fight, feel the groove, and let his experience take over. And that's exactly what you saw. Now, I'm not a huge statistics person, but I really think that the CompuBox numbers just show an incredible story. So look at this, right? Early on, Eubank Jr., the first round threw 48 punches, 59, 43, 49. Okay, so hovering around 50, slightly less than 50. Then you go to rounds 10, 11, and 12. That man landed 43 of 104 punches, 52 of 109 punches, and in the 12th round, landed 57 of 122 punches at a 46.7% clip. He had his second most accurate round with 20 more punches than his best round prior to that. That is incredible. That is an incredible work rate. It was looking like he was going to stop Conor Benn in that final round. That final round was incredible. You also had Conor Benn returning with 29 landed punches out of his 78th thrown, which was his second best round. Both men had very high output of 109 to 86 in that 11th round. That is the hallmark for an incredible fight. If your output goes up after each round, you know that you are putting on an incredible display of boxing. Obviously, Chris Eubank Jr. has fallen short at the world title level. Conor Benn has not even been near the world title level up until this point. But what those two men did out there was nothing short of an incredible feat. If you had a ticket, whether it was high up in the rafters or ringside, you absolutely got your money's worth. This was an incredible fight. It was an incredible fight to witness, watching it on TV. I'm sure it would have been electric live in the arena. What a fight, genuinely. And the thing is, for as good as the fight was, this is not a hard fight to score. Now, I know I got Mr. Eddie Hearn up in this photo here glaring at Chris Eubank Jr., but Eddie Hearn, who wants to say maybe the fight was a draw, it was close, it was this, it was that. In terms of actually judging the fight, in terms of who won, this was not a close fight whatsoever. It was a clear cut. I think the judges got it exactly correct. It was 116-112, Chris Eubank Jr., and I don't really see another scorecard you could possibly have. I think Eubank, but the thing was, right? So you go into 11-12. If Conor Benn wins rounds 11 and 12, the fight's a draw. So then you go, okay, the fight's a draw. But the fact that Eubank was able to find 100+ punches in those final two rounds, he wins the fight. He wins the fight clearly. You could even entertain 9-3. Even if we look at the final stats here, total punches, Benn threw just shy of 600, Eubank Jr. 912. Benn landed Benn threw 137 punches to the body, landing 35. Eubank Jr. landed 140 of his 350 body shots thrown. These numbers are not particularly close. Optically, the fight was a good fight to watch. It was an optically close fight. I think mainly because Benn had a lot of moments where he would hurt Chris Eubank Jr., whereas Eubank didn't start to really hurt Conor Benn until that final round. But what a fight. It deserves all the flowers that you can possibly give it because it was just a massive moment, a massive, massive moment. I'm not sure if this is going to end up in the fight of the year conversation. I think that's being a little bit too much of a prisoner of the moment. I think we've seen better fights so far this year. It's only, as of recording, April 29th. I'm sure we're going to see plenty more fight of the year contenders by the time we get to December, but I have no problem with this getting a shout or a, runner-up award because this was a phenomenal fight. And again, for as casual friendly as the promotion and the build-up was, I'm so glad that the fight also played out in a very casual friendly way. I would have hated if this was some sort of stinkfest where Chris Eubank Jr. cruises to a decision. This fight played out basically perfectly for everyone involved. So nothing else I really want to add besides thank you to both men. Thank you. And there's also a rematch clause to this fight. I think more than likely we will get the rematch. I know Eddie Hearn now is hesitant. He might want Conor Benn to try to get a shot at Mario Barrios, but now you're coming off of a loss. I'm not so sure how a loss at middleweight affects his status at welterweight. I think we'll have to see if the WBC adjusts Conor Benn's ranking or not, but I think the rematch will probably happen. There's so much money on the table. If you go through with the rematch, you might make more money in that than you will in any world title fight. You might have to make not only win a world title, but you might have to defend 2, 3, maybe 4 times before you're making the kind of money they're making in this fight. So I foresee the rematch. I do. But let's move on here. I don't think there's much else I really want to talk about. Oh, I guess one thing really quick that I did highlight on my Twitter, but so Billy Joe Saunders was going to be used as the hand wrap inspector by Conor Benn's team. The only thing I want to say about that is I really have no respect for Billy Joe Saunders. He basically made racial remarks at the security guard outside of Eubank's dressing room, describing him as big-lipped and something else, which I don't really want to get into. So, Billy Joe, you suck. I'm glad that Canelo made you quit with a broken eye socket at TNT at the stadium in Texas that I'm blanking on the name on. Yeah, have fun being a big, fat, tubby loser. I don't have respect for you. And I don't care if he would ever hear this because them's the facts. Okay, let's move on. So, this weekend, we have an absurd amount of boxing. I'm almost, you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to do some live editing. I'm going to put myself in the middle. I'm going to have a heart to heart. I want big fights to happen. Let's hold on. Let me make everything. Okay. I want big fights to happen. I do. I like when boxing superstars are involved in big spectacle fights that get the attention of the casual fans. Canelo Alvarez is a megastar. Ryan Garcia is a superstar. Devin Haney, absolutely a star. Tiafimo, I'd say a fringe star, but sure. Inoue, he has star qualities and he's gaining popularity over here in the United States every single time he fights. I'm meeting more and more people in real life that have heard of Inoue, that have seen videos of him. So we're talking about Canelo Alvarez, Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, Inoue, a little bit of Tiafimo, not so much, but definitely in that conversation. Okay. We don't need all 5 of these people fighting back to back to back to back to back within a 3-day stretch. That is just exhausting. And the fact is that you have one promoter or one network, right? DAZN. They're hosting both the Canelo fight and the Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, Tiafimo Lopez crazy card in Times Square. That's just so much boxing. So much boxing. It was almost to the point where I was considering not making a single podcast about this. I was going to break it up, do all these things. The fact is, I don't really have the time that allows for that currently, so I'm going to put it all together. We're going to go through it one by one. But just for the sake of having this little segment here, we don't need that much boxing. Like, we don't need that many stars. Make a good card with a really good main event and a solid undercard, and I'm set. You don't have to put 5 superstars all in one weekend, because then the next weekend is going to be what? Exactly. So I had to get this off my chest. We don't need that much boxing. I guarantee you. Or at least we don't need it in these high doses. We could have had Canelo this weekend, Ryan Garcia next weekend. Was Times Square not open next weekend? So I had to mention that. But okay, let me shrink myself. Whoops. Oh my goodness. Of course. Let me shrink myself back down to normal size here. Get my spot over in the corner. And let's get into the breakdowns here. So, first fight on the card, or first fight this weekend, brought to you by Golden Boy Top Rank and Matchroom. Ryan Garcia versus Rolando Romero. Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez. And Tiafimo Lopez versus his mandatory challenger, Arnold Barbosa Jr. Also on the card, the debut of Reto Tsutsumi, who is a prodigy out of Japan right now. Let's get into the first fight, Ryan Garcia versus Rolando Romero. This fight, to the best of my knowledge, is being contested at welterweight, 147 pounds. Rolando Romero, his best career wins have been at 135 pounds. He has since moved up to 140, in which he was stopped by Isaac Cruz. Also picked up a couple of comeback wins. Had that fight at 140 against Ishmael Barroso, in which he was getting beaten until the referee decided to have one of the worst stoppages in a fight of all time. Ryan Garcia, despite it being a no contest, is coming off of a career best performance against Devin Haney, in which he was able to knock down Haney 3 times to pick up a majority decision, which has since been overturned due to his use of Ostarine. But as of now, his suspension has been lifted. I think it was as of April 20th when they had fought last. That was 1 year of a suspension. And he's back. Now, in the build-up to this fight, just like in the build-up of Chris Eubank Conor Benn, in which we have to pretend that Conor Benn was never on steroids, now in this build-up, everyone's going to pretend that Ryan Garcia was never on steroids, but he was. Not only was he on steroids, he was on all kinds of alcohol, shrooms, all kinds of drugs. You know, he was not in a good headspace. He seems to be in a better headspace now, although it's sort of hard to judge when there's really not been too much unfiltered media done on this fight. It seems a lot of what DAZN likes to do is have Ryan Garcia pick his best boxer. Oh, I would have the fight IQ of Muhammad Ali and the knockout power of Mike Tyson. All that stuff is very bland and boring, and I don't care. Give me real, uncensored interviews, but they're not going to do that. Moving on from that, though, Ryan Garcia is a bigger fighter than Rolando Romero. He is a man with better wins, a better amateur background, better career momentum. I don't foresee Rolando Romero really having any success in this fight. All he pretty much has is a big punch, and I think Garcia is too fast for Romero to land it. For those reasons, I'm going to go with Ryan Garcia by knockout in the 7th round. I also think Ryan Garcia is a showman. I think he'll fool around a little bit. I think the moment of fighting in Times Square, which is remarkable, we'll get to him a little bit, but I have to back him here to find a way to stop Rolando Romero, who has been stopped twice before. The other thing is, I guess before I move on here, I do think that fighting in Times Square is a big novelty, and I do think it will appeal to the casual fans, but I don't think it's going to appeal that much. In the same vein where you had Speed and KSI at the fight in Tottenham Hotspur this past weekend, and those two men are absurd megastars right now, currently in the world, but there's just something about a mistranslation. I think, yes, this is a huge spectacle event, but when you only have 400 seats, 100 and so of them are guaranteed to all the Saudi oil lords that are coming to watch the fight. Another 100 and so are for all the family members of the fighters on this card. You're dealing with a couple dozen seats for who I imagine will be super wealthy, high figure people in Times Square. When you don't have a feasible way to have a crowd there, I mean, I guess people could gather and try to watch from hotel rooms up above, but I'm not sure how much this is going to translate into a big thing. Maybe if this can get some real, Channel 5 solid coverage by not just boxing news outlets, but New York outlets, then maybe this transcends and goes further beyond and becomes a huge thing. Oh, did you see there was boxing in Times Square? Wasn't that amazing? There's potential, but I'm not so sure about how amazing of an event this is going to be in terms of getting the public's attention. I'm just not sure or convinced on that. Moving on here, the next fight. So Devin Haney is fighting Jose Ramirez. Jose Ramirez, strangely enough, has wanted to fight Devin Haney for a long time. I recall an interview of him saying something akin to, "I've trained my whole life to defeat Devin Haney." Something like this. I swear I'm not making this up. I don't have it in front of me, though. But the thing is, yes, Devin Haney is coming off of a damaging fight against Ryan Garcia, his first career loss, despite it now being a no contest. But it's still a unique experience for him. He's been through absolute hell, by the way, in terms of his PR, in terms of no matter what he posts on any social media, people clown him, people say, hey, dodge a left hook, Ryan Garcia owns you, all of this stuff. I would not want to be Devin Haney right now, despite all of the money and acumen he might have. Here's the thing. The reality of it is, I watched Jose Ramirez have a horrible flat performance against Arnold Barboza Jr., where he just got outboxed in a quiet fight. And if there's anyone who is going to be better at outboxing someone in a quiet fight than Arnold Barboza Jr., it's going to be Devin Haney. For that reason, I have to back Devin Haney to win by unanimous decision. I really, just like the Rolando Romero fight, I don't see any other fight really happening here. I think these two are pretty clear cut, which is why you see in all of the build up to this fight, this is basically an expensive and overt advertisement for what is the almost inevitable rematch between Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney sometime later this year, possibly in September, although it's subject to change based on, I guess, how these fights play out. But give me a Haney. I think he's almost guaranteed to win, much in the same way of a Ryan Garcia here. But we'll see. We'll see if Jose Ramirez really has one last great performance left in him. He was a great champion. He was a unified champion who fought for the undisputed title. He is someone deserving of respect, but I just don't think he has that same killer mentality. This fight with Haney is happening at 144 pounds, I think still, despite them wanting it at welterweight. that stuff is so confusing that I don't expect anyone to understand it. But the reality is, Ramirez, the weight cut has been killing him, but I'm just not so sure that him getting a few extra pounds of water in his system is going to be able to stop Devin Haney. So I have to back him by decision here. Also on this card, Teofimo Lopez taking on his mandatory challenger, the WBO interim champion, Arnold Barboza Jr. This is the most competitive fight on the card by a country mile, by several nautical knots, by a few hundred kilometers, by any measurement that you want to use. This is obviously the best fight on the card, at least in terms of competitive nature. Here's the thing. I'm seeing so many people pick Arnold Barboza Jr. I understand the run that Arnold Barboza Jr. is on. He beat Jose Ramirez. He's coming off of an excellent win. Over Jack Catterall. He has other good wins to his resume. Zalasani Ndengi. I don't have to pull it up to know that he's got good wins, and he's generally on a great run. He's something like 30-0, undefeated. And I know that Teofimo Lopez, conversely, is coming off of a shaky performance against Steve Claggett, who a lot of people don't know how good he is. A bad performance against Jermaine Ortiz, in which he arguably lost. A bad performance against Sandor Martin a few years ago. But then he gets these rejuvenations. You go back to Lomachenko during the COVID era, shocking the world. You go back to the Josh Taylor fight that I was there for in person, shocking me and the world. The thing is, I know that Teofimo Lopez does really bad against back foot smart boxers that can fight at long range and not let Teofimo get on the inside. The problem is, Arnold Barboza just can't win a fight clearly to save his life, and I just can't back him to beat Teofimo Lopez. I just can't do it. I would rather come on the show next week and be dead wrong than predict Arnold Barboza Jr. to win. I just can't do it. Arnold Barboza in his last fight, it was a 115-113 split decision to Jack Catterall. Then before that, again, the Jose Ramirez fight, 96-94 across the board. He has the Sean McComb fight, he absolutely lost, but then they gave it to him. I'm not so sure that I can back someone that keeps winning on the finest of fine margins to beat Teofimo Lopez. I'm just not sure of it. Now, you might say, well, hold on, isn't that evidence that no matter the circumstance, Barboza finds a way to win? And to that, I have no real good counterpoint. That is a perfectly valid way of looking at this fight. Arnold Barboza has been proven to always find the way to win. But I just can't see it against Teofimo Lopez, just from the difference in age, by the way. Teofimo Lopez is 6 years younger. He's got the better career wins. I understand Arnold Barboza Jr. can win. I do. But I have to back Teofimo Lopez to win by a unanimous decision. I think speed is going to be the biggest factor. Teofimo Lopez, at least by what the tape shows me, seems to be several degrees of speed faster than Arnold Barboza Jr. Jack Catterall is not particularly fast. Jose Ramirez is definitely not a fast fighter at all. And I think Teofimo Lopez on speed will be faster than Arnold Barboza and will not let Barboza outbox him, because Teofimo Lopez will be able to connect quicker. And that is the attribute I think that will give Teofimo the edge. But again, he can lose this fight. This is a dangerous fight for Teofimo Lopez. He needs something big here. But every time Teofimo Lopez's back is against the wall, he finds a way to win. I'll pick him. Let's move on really quickly to the debut of Reto Tsutsumi, who just picked up his Japanese boxing license a few weeks ago. He's fighting a nondescript opponent. I have a winning by KO in the second round, but I did want to give him a shout out in case you watch and see this fighter on the card. Let's move on to the former face of boxing, maybe still the current face of boxing. We got Canelo Alvarez taking on William Scull, who follows me on Twitter, by the way. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, go to @PhilXFights on Twitter. If you want to support the show, if you like what I'm doing here, I've never asked for it before, but apparently it helps a lot. And if you've made it to this point in the show, drop a like, drop a subscribe, even just give me a comment. I really like comments. I like to read what you have to say. If you've made it to this point in the video, you must have been enjoying something I'm saying. Maybe it's just playing in the background. I know I do that a lot. Just drop a real quick comment. Just anything about any question you might have. I promise I'll get to them all. But yeah, a like, a share, a follow, anything helps out. Trying to grow. So, yeah. But beyond talking about how William Scull follows me on Twitter, this is for the undisputed titles. Obviously, Canelo does not have the IBF title. That is held by William Scull. It's an interesting fight just by the sense of William Scull seems to be a very big, a very large opponent, arguably even bigger than an Edgar Berlanga. I'm not so sure, but it seems to be close in that regard. But Canelo, I know he's not looking amazing anymore. His fight against Jaime Munguia and Edgar Berlanga were essentially the same fight, where Canelo was able to just be so much faster, so much better defensively, like not even close. And his defense just allowed him to basically not have a threat of anything and was able to find ways to knock down his opponents and just win an easy decision. I was thinking, though, against William Scull, his performance last time out, winning the world title, was really not confidence inspiring. I think Canelo Alvarez has dealt with better opponents than William Scull. Hot take. But I was really teetering on, does Canelo win by knockout or decision? But I don't like that he didn't stop Jaime Munguia. And if you want to talk about, oh, well, he carried him because Jaime Munguia is Mexican too, and he didn't want to ruin a fellow Mexican's career. I don't know, man. I don't know how much I really believe that. Shouldn't you want to get a knockout? Shouldn't you, especially when you're dealing, I'm not even going to get into all of the Canelo avoiding David Benavidez stuff, because if you don't believe that at this point, I don't know what to tell you, quite frankly. But Canelo should have stopped Edgar Berlanga, man. What? Okay, you want to use the fellow Mexican, all of that? All Berlanga did was disrespect Canelo all fight build-up. And if he knocked him out, it would have made no difference. But he couldn't stop Edgar Berlanga. And I don't think he'll stop William Scull. I'll give Canelo unanimous decision. Same thing like his other fights. He'll find a knockdown and not capitalize. And then we'll still have questions about where Canelo is at. What is the point of him fighting anymore? What is he doing? Because now he's not even fighting in America, right? This is his first fight outside of North America. He's not fighting in the United States or Mexico. He's taking the Riyadh season money. I'm sure the money is amazing. Maybe he just wants to keep fighting for said money. Just look to line his pockets as big as possible. But it gets to a point where Canelo, if you're not in the biggest fights possible, I'm not sure how many people are going to want to still see you. But even as I say that, the Canelo contingent is still out there. They are ride or die. They're diehards for Canelo. So, you know what? I guess if Canelo just wants to take a certain level of fight over and over, make guaranteed money, I guess he's entitled to do that, and there's not really anyone to stop it. But moving on here, Jaime Munguia taking on the man who bested him last time out, Bruno Saras from France. Now, when I saw the Jaime Munguia-Saras fight the first time, I was watching with my best friend. We were sitting on the couch, and I was like, oh, yeah, here's this guy Munguia. He's a real wrecking machine. Watch the way he's going to stop Saras. And then he knocks down Saras in the second round, and it looked like, oh, yep, here it comes. Munguia's a wrecking machine. Then Saras found the perfect shot over the top on the temple of Munguia, put Munguia down. The referee ruled him as out. The thing is, I'm not going to predict that to happen again. I thought Munguia looked significantly bigger than Saras. Saras, after that fight, had said, oh, I'm actually a middleweight. I don't want to fight him at super middle again. I just took this fight for the money. I think Munguia, with proper motivation and pretty much the same approach as last time, but just not getting caught again, I think he can beat Saras, and I think he can beat him handily. I'm going to go, oh, whoops. Oh, no, that's really annoying. I'm going to go by Munguia by KO in the 6th round. Also by KO, I guess it's now revealed I'm going to go with Efe Ajagba to upset Martin Bakole. And here's the thing, right? Munguia, when he got knocked out, that was last December or November, something like that. That was last year. He's going to have a couple of months now to refuel, reset. You know, let's see here. When was Munguia stopped? Let's go to that. Munguia was stopped. When was that? That was, December 14th. Okay, it was last December. Okay, you got 5 months to refuel your brain. Martin Bakole, who's taking on Efe Ajagba, a huge puncher, was just knocked out by Joseph Parker February 22nd on the rematch of Bivol Beterbiev, that undercard. So I'm supposed to believe that basically 2 months later, he's going to fight a huge puncher, but because Bakole is the so-called boogeyman, he's still going to beat Ajagba. I was already having questions if Bakole was going to beat Ajagba when they were originally scheduled to fight. But now Bakole got shipped halfway across the world for basically a paycheck. I'm not sure he beats Ajagba. I wasn't then, and I'm really not sure now. You have Ajagba who's on a hell of a run. Beat Guido Vianello, beat Jan Hoskobutsky, beat Stephen Shaw. Really good wins on his resume. And yes, he has the one loss to Frank Sanchez. But Sanchez, at that point, was probably the best Sanchez we've ever seen. And was a way just more efficient boxer than Efe. The Cuban style, which I always make a joke about. But seriously, way better punch selection, good boxing. That's how he beat Efe Ajagba. Martin Bakole makes no mystery of what he's going to do. He's going to be 300 something pounds and walk you down and come forward and look to land bombs. And I just think Efe Ajagba is way fresher. And Martin Bakole now has lost 2 times in his career, both by knockout. I wouldn't be surprised if he loses by knockout again. So give me Ajagba. Maybe this ends poorly. Maybe Martin Bakole comes in there, looks like a mean, lean fighting machine, and gets his career right back on track, but I don't see it. There has to be consequences for poor decisions like taking the Joseph Parker fight on, 12 hours notice across the world. There has to be a consequence. I think the consequence is getting knocked out again and going way back to the back of the line and no longer being any kind of boogeyman. But we'll see. Also on this card, Badu Jack taking on Norer Mikhailjan. Now, originally he was supposed to be taking on Ryan Riziki, but Riziki can't stay healthy or accept a fight agreement for some reason. So I had to make this amazing adjustment to the poster here. Badu Jack has been out for some absurd length of time. I can get the precise time, but his last fight was against Ilunga Makabu, February 26th, 2023. He's been out of the ring now over 2 years. He's undersized for cruiserweight. I think he's in his 40s now. And I thought that Mikhailjan's performance against Makabu was very admirable, a 3rd round knockout. I think Ryan Riziki sort of knew that Mikhailjan was going to be a handful, which is why he didn't fight him despite being the mandatory. Wasted a bunch of time. But Badu Jack is back. He was the cruiserweight champ in recess, so he's got his belt back. But I got Mikhailjan winning a clear-cut unanimous decision. I think 9 rounds to 3 or so. I think he's too young, too big, too fresh. All of those sort of attributes I tend to hinge on. Badu Jack's a very slick operator. I like what he did at cruiserweight when he was fighting in that weight class a few years ago. But I'm not going to back a guy coming off of 2 years of inactivity to beat Mikhailjan at this point in his career. Mikhailjan, 2 career losses, that being to Krzysztof Wodeclark and Marius Bredis, 2 very respectable cruiserweights of their era. I don't really have any shame in that. I gotta pick him. Also on this card, Marco Verde, the Mexican Olympian, is making his pro debut against Michel Polina. I expect Verde to get a clear-cut KO. But really cool to see really big prospects like Reto Tsutsumi and Marco Verde have really high-profile debuts. I hope both men really live up to the moment. I'm looking forward to see them succeed further on. But let's go further here because, again, more superstars to cover. Inoue versus Ramon Cardenas in the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. I got to go with him by second round KO. I'm going to be really straight up about this. Look, Ramon Cardenas is, I do think he's respectable. I give him more respect than I think the average Ramon Cardenas opponent grader, whatever I'm trying to say there. But look, a lot of people are giving Cardenas no chance. I give him no chance. But I also acknowledge that at 122 pounds, I think Ramon Cardenas can be considered a top 10 fighter in this weight class at the current moment. I don't think he's some sort of complete bum that doesn't deserve to be in this opportunity. I don't think that's quite true, but I do think that Inoue is going to handle business. And if that happens, he's going to fight Mirjan Akhmadaliev in September. And if that happens, he might fight Nick Ball in December. So we'll have to see if all of that plays out. Now, I got to say, Ramon Cardenas, the last few fights have been on ProBox TV. ProBox TV keeps producing these guys that at the world title level tend to overperform. I don't think it would be crazy if Cardenas continues that trend of having a better than expected performance. But I think better than expected just means he lasts longer than half the fight. Inoue is still arguably the best fighter in the world, guaranteed to be top 3 and best in the world right now. Too explosive, too powerful, too fast twitch. He's got everything. He's the complete package. He's one of the most entertaining fighters to watch this decade, bar none. I got to back him here by KO. Now, this next fight is interesting. Rafael Espinoza deciding to stay at 126 pounds to be the co-feature on this card versus Edward the Kid Vasquez. Vasquez, really more known for his losses than his wins, but that's only because I think he got a really short deal against Ray Ford and similarly did not get the nod against Joe Cordina when he fought him. I think Espinoza might be a little bit of a different beast, though. And the other thing about Kid Vasquez is he's been taking a lot of fights up at 130 pounds, has had some fights I've seen where he got hurt early. I didn't like that. I do understand what people say that he should have been a world champion. I tend to echo those sentiments. I think that Edward Kid Vasquez has a lot going for him in terms of the kind of fighter he is. I respect all of that. But Espinoza is a 6'1" featherweight that if he makes the weight properly, which is the big if, because this man is a behemoth at featherweight, I just think he's too big, too good. Combinations are absurd for a man of his size. And I'm going to pick him to win by a late rounds knockout where it's just going to be accumulation of punishment that Vasquez has not felt before. I think it'll even be surprising to him, like, man, am I going to get stopped? Like, what is this guy? But Espinoza is just such a powerful force right now. I got to back him to win by stoppage. Moving on, so also on this card, I think one of the best now welterweight prospects in the world from the Dominican Republic is Rohan Polanco. I was blanking on his first name. Give me a break here. But yeah, Rohan Polanco taking on Fabian Andres Maidana. Maidana, who, yes, he's had 2 comeback fights, but is coming off of that loss against Mario Barrios, which was a very frustrating performance to watch, considering that Maidana could have beaten Barrios, but for some reason just took his foot off the gas when he didn't need to. But I think Rohan Polanco is better than world champion Mario Barrios. I've liked everything this guy has been doing. Met him in person, cool guy. I'm going to pick him to knock out Fabian Maidana in the 8th round. I think Polanco's headed straight to the top. I like everything about him. His pressure, his punch selection, good power. I know he was at 140, but I think the move to 147 will only suit him as he tends to grow into his body. Give me Polanco by knockout. Also on this card, the return of Reis Alim taking on Rudy Garcia. Garcia coming off of a decision loss to Mirko Cuello, which is, not a bad look. Cuello is quite good. But I think Reis Alim, if he's in any sort of version of him that we've seen before, I think he'll cruise to a unanimous decision win, but I don't expect fireworks, anything of the like. Last fight I'm going to highlight on this card before I head out of here today. We got Emiliano Vargas, Top Rank's new superstar, one of the Vargas brothers of the Vargas dynasty. He's taking on a man by the name of Juan Leon from Spain, and I expect Vargas to come through with a big knockout win. I'm not quite sure of his world title aspirations and all these other things I've heard from people. I do think that he still is quite limited and has very poor defense, much like an early onset Ryan Garcia. But at this level, they're going to give him wins that are very feasible, very plausible, and they want Vargas to have a big knockout on a big card, such as Inoue in Las Vegas. So I think it'll come true. But look, everyone, that's what you need to know about boxing, episode 8, and I will see you all sometime next week, and hopefully I can make a proper news breakdown video for you all as well. So everyone, take care, and bye.